Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. She knocked like a cop with a warrant, clipboard in hand, eyes full of judgment. I thought it was just another HOA complaint. I had no idea it would spiral into lawsuits, hidden cameras, stolen land, and a criminal empire run by the woman next door. Welcome to the quiet war in suburbia. I first noticed her when I heard the knock. Not a polite tap, 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 but that kind of aggressive, open palm thudding reserved for angry delivery drivers or cops with a warrant. It was a quiet Wednesday morning. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee and was halfway through changing the oil in my truck when it started. I walked to the door, still wearing my stained shirt and gloves, and there she was, Karen. Power stance, clipboard in hand, jaw clenched like she was preparing to audition for a role as a Disney villain. "Good morning," I said cautiously, opening the screen door but not stepping out. "Can I help you?" Her eyes narrowed like I'd just insulted her ancestors. "I'm Karen Ellsworth, president of the Briar Hills Homeowners Association." I blinked. "Okay." "You're in violation of several codes," she snapped, flipping through pages like a bureaucratic blackjack dealer. "Trash receptacles visible from the street. Lawn overgrown by at least 3 inches. That rusted vehicle in your driveway? Code 5.6.2. Visual blight." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm sorry. Who told you I'm part of your HOA?" Karen stiffened. "All properties in this zone are subject to the Briar Hills standards." I stepped out now, wiping my hands with a rag. "No, ma'am. My parcel predates your subdivision by about 20 years. I bought it outright. No HOA, no dues. No monthly newsletters with passive-aggressive landscaping suggestions." She gave me a smile that could curdle milk. "Well, I'm sure that's what your realtor told you, but that doesn't make it true. And frankly, your property is lowering the tone of the community." I gestured behind her. "My property is 300 feet from your community. I have woods between me and the nearest model home. If your people are seeing my trash bins, they're trespassing." Karen didn't flinch. "This is a matter of community cohesion, standards, civic duty." I looked at her clipboard, then at her. "Ma'am, I'm not obligated to participate in your Stepford cult, so if you'd kindly—" "I'm not leaving," she snapped. "This is serious. We've already documented your infractions and will be issuing a formal notice. Then you're trespassing, and I'm going to have to ask you to leave." She crossed her arms. "Make me." I laughed, mostly because I couldn't believe I was having this conversation on my own damn porch. "All right then." I pulled my phone out and dialed. Karen watched me like she didn't believe I'd actually go through with it. 911, what's your emergency?" the dispatcher asked. "Yes, I have a woman trespassing on private property. Refusing to leave. Verbally aggressive. I'd like an officer." Sent out. Karen's lips twisted. "You're calling the police?" "Really? For this?" "Yup," I said, smiling. "You want to stay?" "Stay. They'll explain it to you." She huffed and muttered something about abuse of law enforcement resources, but she stayed, arms crossed, tapping her foot like she was the one being wronged. 15 minutes later, a cruiser pulled up. Officer Barnes, mid-30s, calm demeanor, stepped out and walked over. "Morning," he said. "What seems to be the issue?" "She's refusing to leave my property," I said. "She claims I'm under HOA rules, but I'm not part of any association. I've asked her several times to leave." Karen jumped in. "This man is in violation of multiple community standards. He's degrading the neighborhood. We've had complaints." Officer Barnes turned to me. "You got proof of ownership?" I handed over the folder I keep for exactly this kind of thing. Deed, property map, date of sale. He flipped through it, nodded, then turned to Karen. "Ma'am, his property is not part of your HOA. You have no authority here." Karen looked like she'd swallowed a lemon dipped in battery acid. "That can't be." "That's not. There must be a mistake." "No mistake," Barnes said. "You're trespassing. I'm going to ask you one last time to step off his property." Then she snapped. Without warning, she swung her oversized leather purse, one of those monogrammed bricks of suburban authority, and smacked me across the chest. It wasn't hard enough to knock me over, but it sure as hell wasn't friendly. The officer reacted instantly, grabbing her wrist and twisting her arm behind her back with practiced ease. "You just assaulted him in front of a police officer, ma'am," he said calmly, as if reading a weather report. Karen's eyes bulged. "You can't be serious. I didn't even—" "He provoked me." "You hit him. You're under arrest." "Turn around." As he cuffed her, she started shouting, "I run this neighborhood. I know the mayor. I know people. Officer Barnes didn't respond. He guided her down the steps and into the back of the cruiser while she kicked and protested. I stood there on my porch, stunned, watching the car pull away with the HOA queen screeching in the back seat like it was a bad episode of Cops. I took a slow sip of my coffee, now cold, and shook my head. Well, that escalated. The following week was quiet, unnervingly so. No clipboard, no pounding at the door, no passive-aggressive notes in my mailbox wrapped in HOA letterhead. Just peace, but peace with an expiration date. On Monday, I got a notice from the local courthouse. Karen, yes, that Karen, had filed a counterclaim alleging emotional distress, public humiliation, and something called male-induced hostility. I almost laughed, but I was still rubbing the bruise where her designer purse had clocked me, so it landed. Flat? Luckily, I didn't have to worry too much. Officer Barnes had filed a full report, and I had video from my porch cam showing the whole incident, from her refusing to leave to her swinging that ridiculous handbag like it was a medieval mace. My lawyer, Sandy, read the claim and raised an eyebrow. "You're gonna love this. She's asking for $30,000 in damages." For what? Ruining her afternoon. Apparently, her arrest endangered her professional standing in the community. Sandy flipped the page. Oh, and caused her to miss an important board vote regarding regional landscaping uniformity. Tragedy, I said, deadpan. A true loss to the aesthetic unity of beige cul-de-sacs everywhere. We countersued immediately. Assault, trespassing, and emotional distress. And while I didn't care much for lawsuits, I wanted this to stick. I wanted her to feel legally the consequences of walking onto someone else's land and acting like she owned it. The court date came quickly. Karen arrived in a blazer so sharp it could cut glass, dragging behind her an attorney who looked like he hadn't slept since the Obama administration. She tried to look composed, but her jaw clenched every time she saw me. My cam footage spoke louder than any lawyer could. The judge watched as Karen refused to leave, launched into her speech about community cohesion, then smacked me like I'd insulted her dog. She flinched visibly when the audio played her saying, "Make me." It wasn't a long case. Karen was found liable and ordered to pay me $42,000 in damages, $10,000 for the assault, $15,000 for emotional distress. I was honestly fine, but if they were handing out checks, I wasn't about to protest, and $17,000 for punitive damages. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear and she immediately objected, arguing she was provoked. The judge wasn't moved. He banged the gavel and that was it. I expected a tantrum, some final, desperate Karen-fueled monologue, but she just sat there, frozen. Maybe for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to lose. Outside the courtroom, a few people from her HOA watched the verdict with interest. They didn't say anything to her. One guy, maybe in his 50s, caught my eye and gave a subtle nod. Like, finally. For the next few days, things were blissfully normal. The HOA stopped sending mail. No more weird flyers under my windshield. My trash cans were right where I liked them, visible and slightly crooked, and no one said a damn thing. But then I noticed something odd. I was out walking my property line when I saw Karen in the distance. Not on my land. She wasn't that dumb anymore, but close. Too close. She wasn't alone either. She was at the house across the wooded ridge, talking to Mrs. Carter, an elderly widow who owned 2 empty lots behind her house. I watched as Karen handed her a folder. They stood there, chatting for nearly an hour. At one point, Mrs. Carter laughed and patted Karen on the shoulder like they were old friends. That same week, I saw Karen at 2 more houses in the same area, always with that folder, always smiling, always outside the boundaries of her HOA. Something didn't sit right. Later, I ran into my neighbor Steve while fixing the mailbox that some kid had apparently mistaken for a Target. He mentioned Karen had offered him a deal. She'd rent out part of his unused land for a landscaping company she was working with. She said they just needed a bit of yard to park some trucks for a few months, he told me, sipping from a can of warm beer. She's even offering a signing bonus. A signing bonus, I repeated. Yeah, $5,000 up front plus monthly rent. And you're considering this. She's got paperwork, man. Fancy looking, with stamps and everything, Jesus. I made a few more stops, talked to Susan down the street, then the Millers. Same story. Karen had been busy, friendly, helpful, offering what sounded like sweetheart deals to rent out underused backyard space. No one seemed too concerned. After all, the land was just sitting there. I tried warning them. I told them about the court case, told them what she did, how she just made up rules and acted like everyone was subject to her suburban kingdom. But they just shrugged. Maybe she's learned her lesson, Susan said with a shrug. I mean, it's just a lease. Not like we're signing over the house, Steve added. I didn't push harder. They were adults. They made their choices. I walked home, wondering if I was being paranoid or if I'd just witnessed a snake shed its skin and start slithering into new territory. A couple of months passed, and I tried to mind my own business. I really did. But it's hard to stay in your lane when the houses around you start turning into slow-motion disasters. One morning, around 8, I stepped outside with a cup of coffee and saw Steve pacing back and forth on his lawn, phone pressed to his ear, free hand waving wildly like he was arguing with a ghost. I walked over. "You good?" I asked. He hung up without saying goodbye. "No," he muttered. "That bitch tricked me." "What happened?" "The lease. The one for the trucks. She filed it with the county. But turns out it wasn't a lease. It was a transfer of use document. I signed over zoning rights. She's using that to claim I gave her full control of the back half of my land for commercial development." I blinked. "Wait, she's building something?" Steve nodded miserably. "Some kind of prefab storage shed went up last week. Contractor showed up with a permit and everything. When I objected, he showed me the file. It's my signature. Right next to her name, I swore under my breath. "You talked to a lawyer?" "Yeah." He said it's airtight. My signature's there, notarized. Pages are clean. I don't even remember signing that section. She switched pages on you? That's what I think. But proving it? He said I'd need to catch her doing it again. Otherwise, it's just me being negligent. I felt sick. Over the next few days, I found out he wasn't the only one. The Millers, same story. Signed a deal to let Karen host a community compost project on their unused slope. Turned out she sold the land rights to an LLC the day after. Now they're stuck in a lawsuit trying to get it reversed. Susan. Her equipment lease ended up being a 12-year binding agreement with a shell company she later traced back to an address registered under one of Karen's cousins. All of them said the same thing. She came in friendly. She brought paperwork. She said it was temporary. She smiled a lot. Now they were scrambling, terrified, and not just of the financial loss. Susan's house was now adjacent to a fenced-off yard with electrical boxes and motion sensors. She didn't even know what was being built there. It was spreading. By the third week of that month, I counted at least 4 houses around the outer ring of our area that had either lost a portion of land or were in the process of fighting it. Each time I drove past one of those properties, I saw the same things. Bright survey markers, unfamiliar pickup trucks, and always, Karen's silver SUV parked somewhere nearby, like a specter overseeing the feast. The worst part, she was smart this time. Everything looked legal, notarized, filed with the county, clean, professional. I tried to raise the alarm again, walked house to house, showed people the cases piling up, even passed around a printout of the lawsuit Steve had just filed. Most people shrugged. "Well, it's not happening to me." Or, "Karen's a little intense, but she knows what she's doing." Someone even said, "Honestly, it's impressive. That woman knows how to run a deal." That one stuck with me. They were too charmed, too blind, too proud to admit they'd been duped, or too scared to get involved. So I stopped knocking. Let them burn, I thought. Maybe that's what it takes. But the next week, 2 of them came to my door, Susan and Steve, looking like they'd aged a decade. "Mike," Susan said, eyes red and wild, "we need your help." "I warned you," I replied, not moving from my doorway. We know. But she's suing us for trespassing on our own property. She says we're violating her rights now," Steve added, voice hoarse. "She built a damn security fence and installed cameras that film our patio. And we can't even legally tear it down." I looked between them. Part of me wanted to slam the door in their face. You can't fix stupid, but I didn't. "Come in," I said. "Let's talk." They sat at my kitchen table like shell-shocked survivors of a war they never saw coming. They told me everything. Timelines, documents, names of LLCS. I took notes. They'd even discovered 2 other neighbors who got caught in similar lease deals. One was elderly and barely remembered what she'd signed. The other was a single dad, working 2 jobs, who hadn't even realized his backyard was being subdivided until a bulldozer arrived. I knew then this wasn't some greedy real estate play. It was a system. Karen was running a well-oiled con, one that used just enough legal smoke and mirrors to make it impossible to stop after the damage was done. I needed more than outrage. I needed evidence. "I'll help," I said finally. But not alone. They looked up, hopeful. I'm calling a lawyer. And a private investigator. Hiring the lawyer was easy. Sandy was already looped in and furious. Hiring the investigator took a few more phone calls. I needed someone smart, discreet, and used to swimming in murky legal waters. I got exactly that in the form of Troy Greaves, a retired cop who'd once worked financial crimes in Vegas. He showed up at my place in a black Wrangler with a dented fender and an old-school leather folder, not a laptop. He had one of those permanent squints that made you feel like you were being interrogated, even when he was complimenting your coffee. "You think this Karen's laundering money?" he asked, flipping through the mess of printouts and scribbled notes I gave him. "'Cause I'll tell you right now, that's how it smells. Straw corporations, layered transactions, forged signatures, classic real estate pump and dump." I looked at Susan and Steve, who were sitting nervously at my table. "She's getting bolder. And smarter," Greaves nodded. "And if she's this careful on paper, that means she's making mistakes elsewhere. People like this always think they're too clever to get caught." We agreed to give him a few weeks to dig. Backgrounds, financials, property deeds, shell corporations, known associates. Meanwhile, I told Susan and Steve to start quietly talking to more neighbors. Not the ones already burned, but anyone who might have signed something. Anyone acting weird. Anyone suddenly flush with cash. It took less than a week for the list of victims to hit 12. One of them was a guy named Leonard, who'd signed what he thought was a maintenance easement for Karen to prune some trees near a drainage line. That easement turned into a full property lien filed under a landscaping company in another state. Another neighbor, Beth, found out her backyard was technically no longer hers when a survey team showed up and started measuring it for future access development. Greaves called me 10 days in. She's got 5 LLCs across 3 states, all registered to different mailboxes, different managers, but the money's flowing in tight loops. Same bank, same transactions, classic rinse laundering. Yep. And check this. She owns a condo out in Naples, Florida, and another in Lake Tahoe, both paid in cash. I blinked. She lives alone in a 3-bedroom here. Not exactly, he said. She sleeps here. She lives out of town most weekends. He sent me a few grainy photos taken outside a fancy rooftop bar 2 towns over. Karen, in a red dress, laughing at a high-top table with a glass of wine in hand, surrounded by people half her age. "This is where she runs," Troy said. "No HOA, no nosy neighbors. She shows up Fridays, leaves Sundays, keeps up appearances here during the week, but the real face is there." "What's she doing in that bar?" I asked. "Networking, hooking rich marks. I've seen 3 guys walk her to her car in the past month." That's when the idea hit me. "I have someone who might get her to talk," I said. Troy raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "My brother. Dylan was my younger brother by 7 years. Not a criminal, not a con man, but he'd always had that look. Tall, great smile, jawline that could sell you a timeshare in Alaska. Charming, clean cut, dangerous in a suit." I called him up and explained the situation. "You want me to seduce a middle-aged HOA president? Think of it as community service." He laughed. "You're insane. She's laundering money. She's destroying people's lives. She's got over a dozen victims. We need someone on the inside." There was a long pause. Then, "What's her type?" "Men with wallets." He showed up that Friday in a rented Mercedes, wearing a Rolex I knew he couldn't afford, and a sport coat that probably had more charisma than I did. I gave him a dossier on Karen, her hobbies, her hangouts, her aliases. I felt like I was planning a sting operation because, well, I was. Dylan went to the rooftop bar that evening and played it cool. Troy had someone on site watching discreetly. Within an hour, Karen was at his table. Within 2, they were drinking champagne. By midnight, they were leaving together. He called me the next morning. "She's all over me," he said. "Thought I was an investment banker. Wants to collaborate on a real estate play. You get in her place?" "Yep." "You get the laptop?" He paused. "Mike," he said carefully, "you're not gonna like what was on it." "What?" "Man, there's more than contracts. She's got video folders." "What kind of videos?" "The kind where she's not in them. But other people are. People who don't know they're being filmed. In bathrooms, bedrooms, living rooms." I felt my stomach turn. She's recording the homeowners. She's installing hidden cameras. And I found some screenshots with file paths linked to a Tor server. She's selling the feeds. Looks like it. Troy confirmed it later that day. He cloned the hard drive, and it was all there. Contracts, forged documents, bank transfers, multiple user accounts on dark web platforms, folders labeled by addresses, dozens of video files. She wasn't just stealing land. She was spying, monetizing, violating in the worst way. We had her. I couldn't sleep the night we cracked her laptop. The kind of sick, metallic tension that sits in your stomach and simmers. What we'd found wasn't just fraud. It wasn't just deception. It was predation. Systematic, calculated, and intimate in the worst possible way. Troy delivered the clone drive to Sandy first thing the next morning. She took one look at the directory tree and said, "Jesus Christ." There were folders named by addresses. Inside, spreadsheets, scanned signatures, bank statements, and video files. Dozens. Some recorded in high res, multiple angles, hidden cameras in ceiling vents, behind bookshelves, disguised as smoke detectors, in bathrooms, bedrooms, children's rooms. Karen had been installing them during her property visits. The paperwork she had homeowners sign included clauses that granted access to site improvements, and sometimes she even claimed it was to install eco-monitors or smart irrigation. Sensors. Most people didn't even read the fine print. We didn't just have a real estate scam, we had a full-blown surveillance and exploitation racket. But here's the thing. On paper, she still looked clean. Every file was dated, every contract stamped. Most of her companies were registered to second cousins or fake names that would take weeks to untangle. It was masterful, evil, but masterful. Dylan, meanwhile, played his part to perfection. After their first night together, Karen texted him daily, called him her secret partner. She thought he was a tech investor from out of state, working on blockchain-powered property tokens, whatever that even meant. She ate it up like it was candy. The following weekend, she invited him to her place again. He brought a second encrypted USB. This time, he went for her external backups, the hard drive plugged into her Wi-Fi router. Jackpot. It held everything. Tax records, rental income logs, a spreadsheet listing content buyers, usernames, payment confirmations, crypto wallet IDs. Some of the transactions were 6 figures. We froze when we realized what we had. This was no longer just state-level criminal. This was federal, interstate identity fraud, illicit surveillance, possibly even trafficking if she'd sold videos involving minors. Sandy made the call to the district attorney's office, not the local one, the federal division. "Don't breathe a word," she warned us. "We've got enough to bury her, but if she catches wind before an arrest warrant, she'll disappear." Women like her don't go down easy. Meanwhile, Troy connected the dots between her real estate schemes and the laundering. She'd been cycling dirty money through fake leases, overcharging clients, creating consulting agreements between her shell companies, and writing it all off as development cost. She was reporting more losses than gains, intentionally hiding profits while building a slush fund she parked offshore. "She's a one-woman criminal syndicate," Troy muttered. "Been running this crap for years." I don't even know if the HOA gig was ever real. It might have just been her training wheels. But even with all that, we still needed more victims to come forward, more real people who'd been harmed. Prosecutors needed community impact. That's when I started going door to door again, this time armed not with warnings, but proof. I showed the Carters the contracts they'd signed and the hard evidence that their property had been sold twice in 2 years without their knowledge. I showed Beth screenshots of her own backyard from Karen's camera feed. I showed Leonard the altered lease with a forged notary seal. At first, most of them were paralyzed, scared, embarrassed. "Jesus," Leonard whispered, flipping through the papers. "She knew I was going through chemo. She offered to manage things while I was in treatment, said she was doing me a favor." Beth burst into tears when she saw a video of her dog in the yard, recorded from a camera in her gutter. I didn't even know she'd been back there. Every day, more people cracked. 10 signed witness statements turned into 15, then 20. One woman came forward with a full timeline of every visit Karen made to her home. Another dug up a handwritten note Karen had left behind that said, "I'll take good care of your space. You won't even know I'm there." We handed it all over. By the time the prosecutors were ready, the case file was over 300 pages thick. FBI agents were involved. A tech forensic team spent 3 days dissecting the metadata on Karen's files. We had transaction trails, contracts, surveillance footage, emails, correspondence with fake legal advisors, shady lawyers who helped her reword documents to avoid detection, and still, somehow, she had no idea what was coming. She was too busy playing her new role, honey-trapping Dylan with late-night wine tastings and talks of starting a portfolio together. She told him she wanted to expand into international holdings, asked if he'd ever been to Belize. He played along, smiled, said he had contacts in Panama. The night before her arrest, Karen sent Dylan a text. "I trust you more than anyone I've ever met. I feel safe with you. I almost felt bad. Almost." The morning of the takedown was weirdly quiet. No dramatic sunrise, no cinematic thunderclouds, just a muggy, overcast Tuesday that smelled like cut grass and diesel. I sat in my truck at the end of the cul-de-sac with Troy in the passenger seat, both of us watching Karen's driveway through a pair of coffee-stained binoculars like a couple of divorced mall cops. She emerged from the house around 9, all decked out in designer yoga gear, phone to her ear, wearing a look of pure smugness. I recognized it. That was the look of someone who thought they'd won. That was the look of someone too arrogant to even consider the possibility of collapse. The unmarked SUV rolled in silently from the other end of the street. Then another. Then a squad car, not local, but federal. She noticed the moment the first agent stepped out. Dark jacket with the letters FBI blazoned across the back. Karen froze mid-step. They approached her calmly. I saw her head tilt in confusion, then slowly, beautifully, shift into panic. She started backing up, started to say something. Then the cuffs came out. No shouting, no chaos, just quiet, methodical destruction. They read her the charges right there in the driveway. Wire fraud, real estate fraud, unauthorized surveillance, invasion of privacy, conspiracy, money laundering, distribution of illicit materials across state lines, and obstruction, just for flavor. She tried to play it cool at first. Told them she ran a homeowners association and this had to be some mistake. But they had the warrant, they had the files, and they had her dead to rights. They raided her house for 9 straight hours. FBI tech teams confiscated 5 laptops, 4 phones, 2 external drives, a whole damn server tower hidden in her basement behind fake insulation, and dozens of documents from a locked file cabinet disguised as an antique dresser. They found blank contracts, notary stamps, multiple IDs, one with her real photo and a completely different name. The part that stuck with me. There was a folder labeled Plan B. Inside, a passport, flight reservations to Aruba, and a burner phone with a single number saved as Simon Emergency Exit. She had no idea she was already too late. By nightfall, the news broke. Local outlets started airing footage of her being led to the car, still in Lululemons, now with a face full of disbelief and mascara tears. I watched it on 3 different channels. By the end of the week, every victim who came forward got a personal call from the prosecutors. Some were crying. Some just thanked me. Some, honestly, were pissed it took them so long to realize what was happening. But Karen wasn't done yet. Oh no. Her lawyers filed an emergency motion for bail, claimed she was being unjustly detained, said the videos were taken out of context, that she was installing cameras for homeowner safety, that the contracts were all mutually agreed upon. The judge didn't buy it. Bail denied. Flight risk. Boom. Now the real war began. The civil cases. Every homeowner she'd swindled filed a claim. The county began reversing zoning approvals she'd illegally pushed through using falsified documents. The shell companies were frozen. The bank accounts under audit. But not everyone would get their land back. And that's where it really stung. Some parcels had already been sold. Twice in some cases. Third-party buyers with no knowledge of the scam. One LLC had already flipped 2 of the lots to a commercial contractor and the paperwork was airtight. The land was gone. Not stolen, just legally misdirected. Sandy told us it would take years of litigation to sort out, maybe longer. Some victims wouldn't recover a cent. Others would fight for partial ownership. There were so many layers, like a damn onion of legal hell. But even if the war wasn't over, we'd cracked her machine. I spent evenings with Troy and Sandy, helping coordinate timelines for the feds. We identified 12 direct victims with confirmed property theft, 16 with financial fraud, and 5 with verified surveillance violations. One case involved a child. That one turned everyone cold. A week later, Karen tried the media route. Her attorney arranged an interview. A woman wrongfully accused, the chyron read. She blamed disgruntled neighbors, said she was being punished for being a strong, organized woman, claimed I was obsessed with ruining her reputation. I laughed so hard I nearly broke my chair, but the prosecutor wasn't laughing. They filed a motion to use the interview as proof she had zero remorse and was likely to interfere with witnesses. The judge approved it. Meanwhile, Dylan ghosted her, obviously, changed his number, deleted the fake investor profile. Karen sent 6 emails. The last one read, "I should have known. You were never real." He replied with a single sentence, "Neither were your morals." Boom. If you've never seen a predator stripped of their kingdom, let me tell you, it doesn't happen all at once. It peels away, layer by layer. Karen didn't explode like a Hollywood villain. She crumbled like stale drywall, piece by piece, while the system she thought she controlled turned on her. The trial didn't start for months, but the pre-trial hearings were a circus. Her defense team tried everything: mental health claims, procedural technicalities, even suggesting that some of the victims consented implicitly to surveillance by inviting Karen into their lives. That line of argument nearly got her lead. Attorney sanctioned. Meanwhile, Troy and I worked side by side with the prosecution, building timelines, locating wire transfers, identifying aliases. Every week, we found something new. A new dummy company, another forged document, another homeowner she tried to bully into silence. She had lawyers working on both coasts, black hat professionals as Troy called them, people who knew how to skirt the law without quite stepping over the line. They had built entire boilerplate contracts that looked legally sound but were loaded with hidden clauses. Some of them even tried to contact the victims after her arrest, threatening countersuits if they didn't retract statements. That move backfired hard. The FBI traced the emails to a server farm in Utah, linked to one of Karen's shadow LLCs. They added witness tampering to her already hefty list of charges. By the time the final pre-trial hearing wrapped up, Karen was facing 19 counts of fraud, 7 counts of unlawful surveillance, 5 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of conspiracy, and 1 count of child endangerment. She was looking at 25 years minimum. The moment it really hit me wasn't in court. It was on a walk through the neighborhood. I passed the Miller's place, quiet, empty. Their house had been foreclosed while fighting Karen's bogus contracts. Steve had moved out of state. Beth was selling her home at a loss. Leonard was still fighting the county to get his zoning rights reinstated. Karen didn't just scam people, she broke them. And the system wasn't fast enough to undo it all. Some of the buyers who'd unknowingly purchased stolen land, they were suing the victims to keep their parcels. One poor guy ended up being evicted from land he'd owned for 40 years, all because Karen sold it to someone else while holding a fake power of attorney. Sandy explained it like this: Karen didn't just commit crimes. She engineered chaos. Legal, financial, emotional, and chaos takes years to reverse. Still, there were wins. The Carter family recovered their land through a quiet title action. Leonard got a settlement from the county after they admitted they never verified the deed transfer. Susan's case got national attention after a news special aired a segment showing the footage from her own backyard being listed on a dark web forum. The exposure helped, so did the pressure. 2 of Karen's former associates flipped under questioning. One was her cousin, the one who'd signed off on fake LLC paperwork. He admitted to helping her forge documents and claimed he didn't know about the cameras. The second was her former lawyer, an oily guy named Brent, who traded his testimony for immunity. He told the court how Karen had deliberately targeted single homeowners, especially the elderly and recently widowed. She called them easy soil, said they didn't ask enough questions, and wanted to be taken care of. That hit hard, because that's exactly what she pretended to be: helpful, a caretaker, a neighbor, the person who knew better. The court unsealed her financials during discovery. It turned out Karen wasn't just rich, she was liquid. Offshore accounts, crypto wallets, a total of $2,700,000 in verified fraud-linked assets. The judge ordered a full asset freeze. At this point, she cracked. Karen tried to negotiate. Her new legal team approached the prosecution with a plea offer: 15 years in exchange for full cooperation, including the names of all her buyers and the source code for her surveillance system. The DA rejected it. 2 days later, they came back with everything. A full dump of her email chains, her client list, even a recorded phone call where she described one victim as too stupid to understand land rights. That did it. The prosecutor said he'd accept a plea only if she served no less than 25 years, with zero eligibility for parole, and agreed to personally testify in any civil case brought against her or her companies. She took it. Karen pled guilty on all major counts. The courtroom was packed the day she stood before the judge, hands shaking, voice cracking as she said the word guilty. No dramatic speeches, no apologies, just silence. Dylan was there that day. So was Susan. So were the Carters. We didn't clap, we didn't cheer, we just watched the curtain drop on a woman who built her empire on trust and then monetized the betrayal. They sentenced her in early spring. No flowers, no redemption arc, no last-minute character transformation, just a gray suit, a pale face, and a federal judge who looked like he'd heard enough. 25 years, no parole, no early release. Karen Ellsworth, the woman who once stood on my porch and told me she ran this neighborhood, was now federal property. It didn't feel like a victory at first. I thought it would. I really did. But watching someone rot in their own mess doesn't fix the cracks they left behind. At least not right away. Still, progress came. Slow, hard-won, but real. The FBI auctioned off her assets. Her Tahoe property, her luxury SUV, even the Naples condo went under the hammer. Some of that money went into a victim's restitution fund. It wasn't much, but it helped a few people get back on their feet. Leonard used his payout to finally finish chemo and move closer to his daughter. Susan installed a real security system and joined a local watchdog group. The Carters threw a cookout just to celebrate having their backyard back. Steve, he sent me a postcard from Montana, said he'd started over. No HOAs out here, he wrote, just elk and peace. The county, shamed by how deeply they'd been manipulated, began auditing every property transfer signed over the past 2 years. Dozens of shady permits were revoked. Some victims even had their property lines restored after aggressive litigation and help from pro bono legal aid that took the story nationally. And then, slowly, the neighborhood began to breathe again. Karen's house, now government seized, sat empty for a while. The feds stripped it for evidence, then sold it to a young couple with zero connection to any HOA. I met them the first day they moved in. They looked shocked when I offered a beer instead of a contract. I thought everyone here was super uptight, the guy said. I laughed. They were. But we had a reset. As for me, I didn't move. I thought about it, thought long and hard. But this was still my land, bought fair and square. No one would take that from me. Not a clipboard, not a fake lease, not a camera in a vent. Troy and I kept in touch. He moved on to another case, something with crypto fraud and Vegas casinos. Sandy got featured in a legal blog and took on a few HOA reform clients after this mess. Even Dylan got something out of it. He said the whole ordeal made him realize how easy it was to weaponize charm. He started volunteering with financial abuse victims, using his investment banker alter ego to coach seniors on red flags. The thing that stayed with me most? Karen never apologized. Not in court, not to the press. Not to the dozens of people she surveilled, manipulated, or robbed. She just vanished behind bars like a grifter's ghost. But her story became a warning. Local news outlets ran exposés. National shows picked it up. Real estate boards updated their guidance. HOAs across the country got scrutinized. Some even folded. People started reading their contracts, asking questions. One neighbor, Ronnie, a former skeptic, stopped me during a walk. "You know," he said, "I used to think you were just stubborn, paranoid, anti-community." I raised an eyebrow. "Changed your mind?" He nodded. "You weren't paranoid. You were paying attention." For the first time in a long time, I looked around my neighborhood and didn't feel like I had to be on guard. No one standing on my porch uninvited, no one watching me through fake smoke detectors. Just birds, trees, and the occasional squirrel trying to fight my trash can. Peace wasn't instant, but it was earned. And that, more than any court ruling or payout, felt like the real win.